Hello, my name is Eric Harlan. I am a Microsoft SharePoint PFE out of the North America region. You can check me out on my blog at www.ericharlan.com and also on Twitter at Eric Harlan. So today I want to do a little teaser session, essentially a real small one, on the overall concept of SharePoint 2013 upgrade. There's been some things that have changed and some things we have to kind of be concerned about and think about when we're doing our actual upgrade. So in this session I'm going to just cover a little bit of the basics. Much more detailed behind all this content, so stay tuned for that and we'll dive a little bit deeper. So real quickly, just a really brief agenda. We're going to talk about what stayed the same for upgrade in 2013. So we're moving from 2010 up to 2013, and a lot of the things have kind of stayed about status quo in terms of how we handle mounting of databases and that sort of thing. But we're also going to talk about what has changed in upgrade for 2013, and there's actually been a lot of things that have changed. And then we're going to actually do a quick demo. One of the things that is a requirement for upgrade to 2013 is the lack of NTLM authentication for web applications. So all of your web applications prior to being mounted to in 2013 with a database or content database that has been using NTLM has to be reverted to claims-based authentication. And we're going to do a quick little demo on how to do that, and we'll wrap it up from there. So a lot of the things that have stayed the same, this is not going to be news to anyone. So we're still looking at version to version via database attached. So the only supported method for for upgrade, from Microsoft itself, is database attach, and version to version, meaning 2010 to 2013. There is no 2007 to 2013 direct. There's no 2003 to 2013 direct. They may be available in some third-party apps that come out, but as it stands now, the only supported method, database attach. Once you have done all the prep work, you've cleaned out all the remnants of past failed feature deployments and site definitions retracted and that sort of thing, cleaned up the environment, ready to push over to 2013. A lot of the same PowerShell commands have stayed exactly the same as well. So if you've used mounting from 2007 to 2010 and you've gone through the paces with test, mount, and upgrade PowerShell commandlets, you're going to be very at home when it comes to 2013. So that's pretty much where we stand on how to actually get the database attached into a web application in 2013. A lot of things that have stayed the same as well. The percentage complete for content databases. Now it's a little bit tricky actually in some of the cases when we get into some of the deeper content of doing upgrade and we talk about service application upgrades. That is not always the case. So when you're doing a service application upgrade, in some cases the percentage complete of how long and how long the actual process has gone and how much further you have to go with upgrade of the service application databases are not always visible. ULS logging has pretty much stayed the same. There's been some improvements in terms of just reporting and clarity and that sort of thing, but you're going to be used to seeing a lot of the ULS logs that come out of 2013 if you've been working with 2010 at all. Just overall downtime mitigation strategies when it comes to making sure that the environment is up as long as it can possibly be up before you make the switch over to 2013. All those same processes that you would have and planning for those and making sure that your environments are in read-only and you're doing this after hours and you're staging in your DNS entries to make sure that the moment someone hits the DNS and they go off to a URL that's pointing to their old 2010 environment, that's in read-only, and then in your 2013 upgrade process you're timing that exactly the way when users are going to be able to use it, and doing your swap over with DNS and that sort of thing. So downtime overall mitigation strategies pretty much the same. Nothing's really changed that would throw a good solid plan out of the boat when it comes to just making sure that people can access the sites that they need to access. Okay, let's move on. So, what has changed? So, a couple things have been either removed or changed in a way that we have to kind of address. So, the big things that we want to talk about really are the fact that there is no web analytics service application. The good thing is that doesn't mean that we don't have any web analytics. That's actually been rolled into enterprise search to an extent. Most of the reporting that was available in 2010 with who visited websites, what they were looking at, how long they stayed, that sort of thing, that's pretty much stayed the same. We've gotten a little bit more robust in terms of some of the reporting that we have as well. The other really big change is, like we talked about earlier, with claims authentication. So the interesting thing about this whole claims thing, if you go to provision your entire 2013 environment using PowerShell, you'll actually notice that central admin needs to be provisioned as NTLM, or can be provisioned as NTLM. Everything else in terms of site collections and web applications, anything with that database that had NTLM as a base level authentication mode has to be reverted to claims prior to being upgraded, and that's a really important thing. You're actually going to get a failed mount attempt if you try to mount a database from 2010 that was using NTLM authentication into 2013, where you've created a web application using claims, because NTLM is not even available when you create the new web application in 2013. So you're going to get an error saying basically you need to go back and it won't accept NTLM. So that has to be done in the 2010 environment. Now obviously we want to make sure that we're doing smart things when it comes to upgrade, right? So we're not doing our claims upgrade directly in production, clearly. We want to stand up a new farm or a dev environment to make sure that we can convert those content databases to claims aware. So once you've gone through all that, and this goes back to when we talked about just making sure that your environment is clean for a smooth transition to 2013, and this is part of it. Cleaning out site definitions, cleaning out features and solutions that were deployed, as well making sure that your content databases are claims aware. The other piece of it is OWA. So Office Web Applications is no longer built directly into the 2013 environment as a standalone service application. It has been branched out to be overall more flexible in terms of larger deployments, and it actually keeps things more simple by branching it out. So if you've ever gone through the process of deploying OWA, you've had issues with installing files and things getting corrupted and that sort of thing. Hopefully at this point you'll have no other issues with that, because we're all going to be in a self-contained box with our OWA server. The only problem with that, obviously, it comes with an additional cost because it's a different SKU item. So that's one of the big changes for OWA. One of the really big changes for search, there's just been a huge push for both search and social in 2013, and we're not going to talk too much about social. There's a lot more of that to be unearthed, but for enterprise search, we have now the fast search has been completely rolled into enterprise search. There's a couple other breakdowns, like search server getting rolled into Foundation, SharePoint Foundation. Everything has gotten beefier by default in search, whether it's Foundation, whether it's server SharePoint. But for server SharePoint, for enterprise search, we have fast completely integrated into the SharePoint search environments. No longer do we have to do standalone installations and that sort of thing just to port into our fast environment. So that's huge. And like I said earlier, web analytics being accessible through search. The other really big portion of what's changed in 2013 is the 14 mode or 2010 mode and 15 mode or 2013 mode, depending on who you talk to and how long they've been involved in the beta process. You'll hear different terminology. So most of the time you'll hear 14 mode or 15 mode. And what that really is it's a full replacement of the visual upgrade that we had in 2010. In 2010 we only really had a virtual reconstruction of what most of a 2007 environment would look like in 2010. So when you did your upgrade, you were able to say, I want to keep this site looking like 2007, and we use a visual upgrade to do that, and that gave us a little bit of time to make sure that users were ready, porting over more content, that sort of thing. But ultimately, it had some downfalls because a lot of the content that we deployed in or features, solution packages, whatever, in 2007 for that matter, were not compatible with 2010 because it was a virtualized look and feel. It was spun up at runtime based on the best possible approach to showing what a 2007 environment will look like in 2010. The difference is that there are physical 14 Hive bits on the 2013 server. When you install SharePoint, it actually deploys a 14 Hive, and this is going to be a little bit confusing for a lot of people who think they're getting a fresh install, and they go navigating through the bin directories and the 14 and the 15 Hive, and they're going to see 14 in there, and they're going to assume that there is a botched install or something was remnant of something else. But that's actually completely normal, and the good thing about that is if you dig into it, you'll see that the template folder is in there and that sort of thing. And what that really means is when we are in 2010 mode, we have a full real-life 100% representation of a 2010 site, but living on the 2013 environment. So most of your customizations that worked with the 2010 environment will work in 2010 mode while living in 2013. I hope that's clear. So basically it allows developers to not have to redevelop a lot of their code and redeploy it to 2013 because it didn't work in the new environment. Hopefully most, like I say most, and that's a big caveat because you have to test this stuff, but most of those customizations will live correctly in 2010 mode, and some even in 15 mode, 2013 mode, once that switch is clicked over. So something to test, something to play around with, but a really cool feature because it cuts down on a lot of downtime mitigation, right? So we could, in theory, swap over an entire environment on a weekend, keep it in 2010 mode or 14 mode, and no one would ever know that they've been upgraded because it'd be the exact same look and feel. So that's a really good feature. And then obviously when you're ready to hit the switch, boom, they're automatically on 2013, which all the new features and that sort of stuff. So that's a great little feature. The other really big component of what's changed is in 2010 when you did a content database mount, the database was, the site collections in that database were automatically available for browsing. In 2013, we have the throttle-controlled site upgrade or site upgrade commandlets and process for that matter. When you do a mount, it's going to be a much quicker mount. However, it's not actually doing the actual upgrade for a site collection until it's told to. So when you're doing the mount, you can obviously throw in your commandlet and your switches to make sure that as you're mounting, the site itself is being upgraded or shortly thereafter. However, the really cool thing is you can stage this out. So if you're doing this over the course of a week, and there's obvious you don't want to do that during the work day when there's people actually working, you can throttle these and queue them up and schedule them to be upgraded at your demand, the farm administrator's demand. These will send out alerts to site owners saying you have X amount of days until we need you to upgrade. Do you want to upgrade now or do you want to wait? They'll be able to click wait or upgrade now. It'll go through the process of upgrading, or it'll put it on hold for X amount of days, which the farm administrator determines how long. There's also a really cool feature. This command goes pretty deep in terms of being able to do reporting on what sites have been upgraded. So being able to see what's in queue, what has been upgraded, what has failed to upgrade, and that sort of thing. So just keep in mind that when you do your mounts, if your sites come up unavailable, it's because you haven't actually gone through the physical site collection upgrade portion of the mount. So it's a two-step process now as opposed to just one in the mount. Okay, hopefully that's clear. So some of the common upgraded service applications, and we're not going to talk too much about this because it's a really deep story, and this isn't even the entire list. The most notable, I think, is probably the first three. So search, because in my opinion, and this is just speculation, because we've got the integration portion of FAST, the index is probably way different in terms of what gets compiled and what gets stored when the index is actually being created, and a bunch of other things that revolve around algorithms and how data is processed and stored in metadata and that sort of thing. The theory there is that that's why we can only do upgrading of the search administration database only. So no matter what, when you do a upgrade from 2010 to 2013, you will need to recrawl, period. There's no other way around it. The only consolation that we get is that if we do a search service application upgrade, we get all of our settings that we had deployed prior. So things like content sources and exclusions and specific inclusions of content that some people could see and some people could not. Just the whole portion of what can be controlled within search administration can only be done in that search upgrade. So anything else, indexes, everything has to be redone. So fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how long it took you to do your initial crawl in your environment. Some people it took weeks because they're huge environments. Some people literally an hour. So it may not be a big deal, it may be a huge deal. Something to be aware of. The user profile database, or the user profile service application, is another portion, and that gets pretty tricky pretty fast. And I'll just go into a quick note about it. We have 3 databases in user profile, and those stay the same within 2013 as well. So we have the search, we have the social, the synchronization, and the profile database. The profile database and the social database upgrade very easily, almost to little fanfare whatsoever. The synchronization database is another story. So in that sync database are basically kept the keys for user profile to be able to authenticate against whatever content sources you're authenticating against, whether that be AD, whatever. And those keys are encrypted, and that key relates back to a physical file within the file system of the server that was doing the user profile synchronization in 2010. And there's a whole exportation process to export that key and import it into the new 2013 environments on the server that's going to be doing the synchronization in that environment. So you can bypass this, and this is the only reason why I really bring it up. You can bypass this by setting up your user profile service application manually, using PowerShell, just like you would in this upgrade process. I should probably mention is done all through PowerShell. And you can leave the synchronization database out, exclude that whole import-export piece, but the only problem is you have to reconfigure all of your connections. Again, if your environment is huge, that's not a big deal. If it's small, vice versa. If it's huge, that's a big deal. If it's small, not a big deal. So it depends on how much work you want to do up front to be able to get that to work in a full upgraded capacity. And then the last thing I'll talk about is the managed metadata service application. And that is extremely straightforward. It's a matter of just mounting or creating the service application, creating the proxy and the database, and all that stuff that comes along with managed metadata, doing the actual mount of the content database, But the only gotcha is that you have to make sure that you change the content type hub URL that you chose when you created the application inside of 2010, because more than likely, and it's not always the case, but and if done correctly, hopefully it's not, but if the URL does change from what it was in 2010, then clearly the hub will not work because it's looking for something completely different. So there's a PowerShell commandlet within the upgrade process of the Managed Metadata Service application that allows you to change that content type hub. So just remember that portion of it. Okay. So again, the changes for upgrading a content database, extremely minimum. The only difference really is just the claims portion. So we're preparing the farm, the destination farm, the 2013 environment, getting everything patched and ready to go and cleaned up. We are doing a read-only and backup of the databases. Actually read-only first, and then we're doing our upgrade to claims. Whether clearly we want to make sure that this is either our production environment, which hopefully it's not, or a test, a backup of the production environment that you're doing all your changes in. Going through, making the change with claims, restoring the content database, test mount the content database to the web application that you've created in 2013, and then doing your site collection upgrade process. So the only two things, and the last bullet point not being on there, and I apologize for that, the site collection upgrade portion and the upgrade of the content databases to claims. Those are the only two things that have changed in 2013, and they're extremely minimum, very low risk and very low effort. So let's talk about the demo that we're going to do within our little session here, and we're going to break through this pretty quickly. We're running out a bit of time here. So there's a process to upgrade a web application, which then translates to the switches being done within the content database to go from NTLM to claims. Now I'm just going to quickly walk through some of these portions. These are all fairly required except for the last portion of that's optional, obviously. So the upfront and main portion of what we need to do is physically doing the actual upgrade to claims, and that you can see in the first section down to the top left there. The second portion, and let me just go through that real quick because we're going to do that in a demo. Essentially just calling your web application, setting the actual web app in the commandlet. You're literally just passing in the set to true for claims authentication and updating it. You can actually revert back. Now I haven't seen what this physically does, so by doing this update and changing it to claims, you'll see in the demo that we can see where it's been changed to claims. But by switching that switch back to false, we can actually revert it back to Windows authentication. The only thing that I haven't tested personally, and that I've read discriminating reports back and forth that you cannot switch from claims to NTLM. It's not supported, but I'm pretty sure it works. So if for whatever reason something goes haywire, you can hit that switch back to false and turn that entire web app back to Windows authentication. So keep that in mind. We have to set the administrator for the claims principal for that new web application, or not the new web application, but the new authentication provider for that web application. Go through and update those policies for that specific role. We'll have to migrate the users. Anyone who has a session open or has checked out a file, they're going to be checked out as the original Windows-based non-claims token user. So we have to upgrade all those users so that they're not being denied and tripped out of the actual environment when it's kicked over fully to claims. And then just provision that throughout the entire environment. And then you have the optional portion there, which I'll let you go through on your own time and change whether you see fit. So that said, let's go into a bit of a demo here. Alright, so we have our 2010 environment up here, and what we're going to do is we're going to create a web application and set it to Windows authentication. And then we're going to go through our little script and change that over to claim-based so that we can, migrate to our new 2013 environment. So let me fire up PowerShell there, and while I do that, let's go in and create just a super standard web application. Now, use your imagination. In theory, this is a web application that's already been created and lives in 2010, has a content database associated with it. Everything is pretty much set, and you're just going in and doing the components you need to do this actual change. So let's do our port numbers here, and we'll literally just keep the entire naming convention the same. We're not going to change much of anything. Keep the security config the same. Our public URL, since I'm working off a local environment here, we don't have to change that. I'm going to keep our create a new web app pool for whether or not you create a new one or use the same one, totally irrelevant, because this is just a test. So let's go and name our content database here so we know to delete it later, and we're good on the rest of the settings. So let's fire that up, and hopefully that won't take too long to actually create, and then we'll actually go through the process of updating that Windows authentication to claims. Okay, now our web application is created, so let's go ahead and hit OK. And we'll see our new web app get refreshed up here. Now, if we check the authentication provider, we'll get a little pop-up that says what kind of authentication model we're set at. So we're set to Windows. So let's run through the first portion of our demo, the very simplistic part that I was walking through earlier, with actually setting the web app name, changing it to claims, and updating the process. So let's go through and script out our PowerShell scripts here, and we'll just say what the web app name was, and we know that's HTTP SP 2010 port number 1717. Okay, go ahead and put that in the memory, and now we're going to reference that to start our actual change. So let's go get SP web application, and let's pass in our set there. Okay, now we got that set. So we have our web app, we've grabbed it. Now let's actually do our update. Make sure we're correct there, no spelling errors. Okay, so in all, we just have to run the update, and we should be golden. Okay, now if our demo worked here, let's go through and see if we've completed the first step of doing our upgrade from 2010 to 2013. And how you can check is simply the same way. So you go back, you click on, or you click next to the web application that you want to check, hit authentication provider, and you'll see that we've changed from Windows over to claims-based authentication. Alright, so let's jump back into our demo, or our slide deck here. Go ahead and wrap that up. So again, most of the things have stayed the same. We have a lot of new features that come along with any new version of SharePoint. So just keeping aware of the changes that have come down the pipe and what they mean in terms of upgrade, and just the additional steps that come along with it are going to go into planning whether or not you physically want to do an upgrade or not. So you very well may get to a point where the environment that you're working with is either too small, or the data is not relevant enough to even do the upgrade at all, or the service application that you want to do an upgrade for may be too small or irrelevant as well, You may not want to do the search administration database upgrade. You may just want to stand up search from scratch and just get the full feature functionality and the exposure of that feature functionality through that process. So thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. My name again, Eric Harlan, and you can catch me on Twitter at Eric Harlan or at my blog at ericharlan.com. And thanks so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this preview session. The full session will be presented at the European SharePoint Conference in Copenhagen on the 4th to the 7th of February 2013, and we hope you can join us there. Visit our website for the full lineup of amazing conference speakers and to avail of our discounted early booking price of only €895, which ends on the 30th of November. Remember to join the conversation today using our Twitter hashtag for the conference, ESPC13. Thank you.